Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Welcome to today's webinar, the third in SCS Global Services Safe in Sustainable Food Systems series. Today, we're going to be looking at the relationship between food safety and food integrity certification systems, specifically how building a strong culture around good food safety and sound process supports efforts down the line to differentiate your brand through various integrity and product certifications. So we are your presenters today. My name is Brandon Nauman. I'm the Technical Director of the Organic Program here at SCS Global Services. I am joined by my colleague Jackie Bowen from the Clean Label Project. What I'm going to do is just stop the screen share here for a minute so you can see Jackie and I. Hello, we are your presenters today. The format will kind of have us going back and forth a little bit between the slide deck, so you'll be seeing a lot more of us as the progression of the presentation evolves. So I'll go ahead and start. Again, I'm Brandon. I'm the Technical Director of the Organic Program here at SCS Global Services. I've been with SCS for 10 and a half years now. I've been involved not only in our organic program, but also closely involved in the launch of our non-GMO verified program, our gluten-free program, our pesticide testing programs, and others. I've been an auditor. I've been involved in standard development here with SCS. Let's see, I studied environmental biology. My background is in organic agriculture. So certainly the work that I do is very much a passion of mine. So it's great to be here with you all today. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Jackie, to introduce herself.
Thank you. So I'm Jackie Bowen. I'm the Executive Director of Clean Label Project. So Clean Label Project is a national nonprofit with the mission to bring truth and transparency to consumer product labeling. For me personally, I'm a food and consumer product safety systems engineer. That makes me a professional buzzkill at dinner parties. So if you want to be talked out of eating or drinking anything, chances are I'm your girl. I've had over 20 years of experience in standards development, inspections, auditing, certification related to everything from dietary supplements to food and cosmetics. So I've been involved in certified organic, certified gluten-free, non-GMO project, and most recently, Clean Label Project. You may be familiar with some of the work that we've done regarding advocacy work around protein powder, baby food, CBD products. The work that we do kind of runs the gamut, and it's all about really bridging the gap between consumer expectations and federal food safety and consumer product law.
Perfect, thank you, Jackie. I'm gonna go ahead and cut back to our presentation here. And just to kind of start things off, I just want to give you guys the background. This is, whoops, sorry about that. This is part 3 of a 5-part SCS series on food integrity webinars. The next in the series will be on October 13th, covering food safety and social accountability, the connection between the two. And then again on November 3rd, we will be covering corporate ESG in food and agriculture. Just one moment here. All right. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen now. So just to kind of give a little bit of a background on SCS, who we are and what we do for those that aren't familiar. We've been around since 1984. And since that time, we've been a pioneer in various sustainability standards, in certification work, working across the economy in so many sectors, including natural resources, the built environment, food and agriculture, consumer products, climate, and more. We really do operate truly globally. We've got representatives in all the populated continents on the country, on the globe for that matter. Whether you're talking about organic certification in California, diamonds in South Africa, building materials in China, SCS is involved. We have over 200 staff globally across 23 subsidiaries and regional offices. We are organized into 3 divisions here at SCS: Natural Resources, Environmental Certification Services, and our Food and Ag certification services, certification, training, and consulting, as a matter of fact, within food and agriculture, as you can see here. This is just an example of the many programs that we offer within our food and ag division here at SCS, from sustainability, fair trade, non-GMO, organic, pretty much every imaginable food safety audit scheme and more. So there's definitely a lot that we are involved in within food and agriculture and beyond food and agriculture, for that matter. And finally, this brings us to today's topic, the new era of smarter food safety, how strong fundamentals can help differentiate your brand through product certification, and really what it means to build a strong food safety culture within your organization. And this is basically the 30,000-foot view of what Jackie and I will be discussing today. When we get to each of these talking points, it really is going to be more of a conversation, a discussion with Jackie and I. We'll cut back and forth between the slide deck and Jackie and I as we discuss each of these points. We're going to start with an overview of the new era of smarter food safety. And what this is the new initiative by FDA to reduce foodborne illness by leveraging new technologies, working in a way to create a modernized regulatory framework for modern food production systems. And then we'll be talking about really ingraining food safety culture into your organization. What does this actually mean? What does this actually look like in action? And then finally, with that kind of baseline understanding of really what good, strong food safety culture looks like, how you can build upon that. Food safety really is kind of a necessary element in every food production system, whether you're looking at agricultural production or whether you're looking at post-harvest handling or processing. Really good food safety fundamentals have to be at the core of every operation. But then really what you're enabled to do, having laid that groundwork, is to use it to really have a platform to differentiate your brand through product certifications, through quality certifications, and things like that. So that really is the punchline of today's presentation, of today's discussion with Jackie and I, is really how building this really sound framework rooted in good food safety provides that platform for you for brand differentiation and customer outreach. So just to start, I'm going to just kind of go over a very high level overview of really what this means, the new era of smarter food safety and the smarter food safety blueprint. This is something that maybe some of you have been hearing about these last months and wondering about, which is why we've decided to talk about it a little bit today. So really, what is meant by this? It's the FDA's ultimate goal to reduce foodborne illness, to reduce foodborne outbreaks by building this common regulatory framework, and it's our job as certifiers to audit and to uphold these standards. Unfortunately, I think, as everybody knows, FDA can be notorious for regulating more through the development of regulations, regulating for regulation's sake, sometimes more than actually looking at process, looking at what works. Focus more, for example, on record keeping than on data and how you can best use this data to support good fundamentals, good food safety. Focusing on what holds in the court of law as opposed to what holds in the court of public opinion, of consumer opinion, or maybe what is the most effective way to get the job done. So this new era effort by FDA is really trying to kind of get outside of that a little bit and to develop a framework that is more relevant to modern food production and food delivery systems. We certainly aren't here today to do an infomercial for FDA, but to really highlight how some of these key elements of what they're calling the smarter food safety blueprint, how those key elements really are relevant to your business and how they can be leveraged to build a strong brand reputation and a strong culture for food safety within your organization. So a big part of this, what the FDA is calling a food safety blueprint, a smarter food safety blueprint, is the adoption of modern technology, modern tools and approaches to managing risks. So this would mean things like investing in systems that digitize your traceability records, standardizing training programs for your staff, integrating behavioral science approaches to the way that you develop procedures and train your staff, making access to these procedures engaging, making sure that your staff are invested in them, want to follow them, can follow them, understand them. And then strengthening adoption of technology in various ways to improve outbreak response, to modernize recall processes, installing detectors and sensors in your production line. So really FDA is trying to emphasize the adoption of technologies to kind of reduce reliance on this human element. And really that's important. And, you know, I think FDA, for all that they do, and as of a immovable object as they sometimes can be, this is maybe a glimpse of them kind of catching up with the reality of modern production systems and what really is important. But more importantly than any of that is, how do you ensure as an operator, as a quality manager, as a brand owner, that these efforts that you're doing aren't just made to pass an audit, to simply pass your food safety audit? Or are you missing an opportunity, on the other hand, to differentiate your brand? You're doing this work. It's the necessary part of being a brand owner, being a processor, being a farmer. You have to lay this really strong groundwork that really is grounded in GMPs and HACCP principles and in really good food safety practice. But how are you making sure that you're not missing that opportunity to build upon that, to truly differentiate your brand? Do you know if what you're doing, for example, is what your retailers want, what your consumer wants? Have you adopted a system that makes the most sense for your company and for your brand? So that's really what Jackie and I are here to discuss today. So really, before we go any further into this, Jackie, do you have any thoughts to share on maybe some critical fundamentals or some key takeaways, you know, before people even put pen to paper in developing their food safety plan?
Definitely. So from my perspective, and really perspective of Clean Label Project, is it's interesting because, you know, over the past several years, you've seen the significant proliferation of on-package label claims, things like certified organic, non-GMO project, certified gluten-free, all of which are important. But at the same time, you also see this increase in consumer and media attention playing out in social media and mainstream media, things like levels of glyphosate in America's best-selling breakfast cereals, levels of BPA leaching from product packaging into finished product, levels of heavy metals in best-selling baby foods. The thing that's interesting is that for the most part, these products are largely compliant in the court of law, but in the court of public opinion, it's a different story. For the most part, the food safety regulatory fabric in America is largely focused on microbiological and pathogen contaminants. But what you see is that consumers are increasingly focused about how the food that they eat, the consumer products they use, how it affects their health as well as environmental health. What we see taking place from a macro perspective from a Clean Label Project is a growing divide between the court of law and court of public opinion. Absolutely, we see compliance at the court of law. That's going to be your table stakes. No one's ever going to say congratulations for not necessitating a recall today. So you want to make sure you hit that. But that's the foundation. Compliance with the court of public opinion and what it is that your target consumers want. That's your true north. That's what's going to get you the basically the consumer trust, the making sure you get the repeat purchases, as well as give you something new and authentic to talk about with consumers as well as your retailer partners.
Great, that makes a ton of sense. And, you know, I would even go so far as to say that it really is important to really, as you said, what is your true north? What is your end goal? What does nirvana look like for you from a food safety standpoint, from a quality standpoint? Understand, you know, what mountain you're going to plant your flag on and pursue it steadfastly. I think that is absolutely important.
Definitely, and along those same lines, it's a matter of making sure that you know, you recognize your product and what it is you're looking to accomplish. Um, it's always interesting because right now, especially for Clean Label Project, we're a consumer advocacy organization. We also write standards related to product purity and things like that. But it's interesting because uh, consumers, there's never been a time that consumers haven't been more interested in popping the hood, kicking the tires, and actually legitimately wanting to know, what is it that you do differently? Tell me about your food safety. Tell me about how you test. Where do you source ingredients from? I mean, you have an increasingly, interested consumer base. And so it's one where now all of a sudden food safety is interesting. Consumers want to talk about it. It's no longer just a matter of like tucking your quality system in a binder in a drawer or an online file. Now your quality systems can actually turn into marketing materials. How can you make this work for you? And being a better literal return on your investment.
Right. Do you have any advice for somebody who is trying to really connect with what their consumers want and really try to understand what resonates right now? Is there a place that they can turn to really help kind of guide this, point their compass, I think, as they're really trying to develop this plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, when I look and think about what the true north is for any given category, I look to what social influencers are talking about. So in other words, it's a matter of if we're talking about baby food, just because that has been such a hot topic lately related to heavy metals. It's a matter of going online, figuring out on social media, what are moms paying attention to? What is the, unfortunately, legal precedent that has been taking place from a kind of class action perspective? What is American Academy of Pediatrics talking about? Independent of what FDA is saying, what are these major influencers that doctors are telling moms and families that they need to do for their kids? So it's a matter, if you're looking to kind of anticipate what it is that consumers want, look to what it is that who are consumers listening to. And those are going to be your online bloggers and social media influencers, American Academy of Pediatrics. But you've got to recognize that your individual product category and what you need to care about over and above FDA compliance requirements is going to vary depending on what product category you're in. For some of you that may be plugged into, let's say, pet food, or maybe plugged into supplements and protein powder, what that true north looks like is going to be a little bit different. But what I will say is one of the three of the topics that are top of mind with consumers right now: heavy metals, pesticides, plastics. Making sure that you check out those when it comes to looking at your supply chain and looking at food safety.
Right. So it would probably be fair to say that a good first step would be really understanding what it is that's important to your customers, and then taking that and really understanding where the risks are in your supply chain and what you can do to best mitigate those throughout your supply chain and in your production system.
Oh, I completely agree with you. It's one where it's so interesting over the past few months, as we hear the different conversations that have been taking place around the Baby Food Safety Act, to use that as an example again for 2021, looking at levels of heavy metals. What I frequently hear is some brands saying like, oh, heavy metals haven't, that's not part of the regulatory requirements. We're not required to pay attention to it. It's not part of the CGMPs. And I would say, on the contrary, the Food Safety Modernization Act actually did require preventive controls, which go into high-risk ingredients as well as authenticity, as being things that brands are accountable for looking into. And so, back to your point, Brandon, it's going back into so many of these certification programs, whether Clean Label Project or the ones that you work on with Gluten-Free, Non-GMO Project, and even traditional food safety. Everything comes down to and is rooted in HACCP programs and critical control points, that if something bad is going to happen, what do you have to proactively do to control for it? And so many of these, that same concept, you apply to same, kind of traditional food safety principles. You can apply it to heavy metals, pesticides, plastics when it comes to your packaging, as well as, Brandon, some of the other programs that you work in. So maybe you want to kind of speak to how CCPs factor into kind of your gluten-free and organic programs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings us to the next discussion point to some degree here. So I'm just going to flash back and just kind of remind everyone where we are here. And really, when you look at food safety and quality culture, what do these sound fundamentals look like, actually operationalized? Like Jackie said, there is so much crossover between what you're going to see in a program that has been developed for HACCP or for GMP as usually a baseline, but then from there it can be very much built out into a system that supports organic certification, that supports identity preserve programs like gluten-free, like non-GMO. So, really what I see, if I'm an auditor and I'm in a food facility, and maybe this is somebody's first organic audit, and maybe there's a little bit of anxiety about, well, I don't really have procedures specifically for organic. Well, I'll say, are you a GMP certified facility? Do you have a HACCP plan? Well, then they say, yeah. Invariably, they hopefully say, yes, I do. And I say, you have your procedures. They just need a little bit of refinement. The same will go for gluten-free. I mean, you can really look at any HACCP plan. And for those that aren't familiar, this means hazard analysis and critical control points. It really starts about understanding where is there an ability for this system to break down vis-a-vis the delivery of a compliant product, right? So if we're looking at organic certification and you're a facility that is handling conventional produce and organic produce, it's, well, not a whole lot different than what you're going to have to write into your food safety plan for maybe handling dissimilar kinds of produce, or for handling perishable items or things that might leave residues on tables. You've got to do a clean out. You have to document the clean out. You have to document what you're using and that what you were doing was effective. And it all needs to be recorded. It all needs to be written down. And so really what good fundamentals kind of start with is identifying these points of risk, understanding your critical control points, and then making sure that you can positively demonstrate compliance through each of these critical steps within your operation, that you are effectively able to mitigate risk. When you're receiving ingredients, did they come in a trailer that is really messy and that has a funky smell and maybe something spoiling in it and the animal scurrying out of it, or did they come from a pristine, very well cleaned trailer that is kept at the temperature that you expect it to be kept at? When you unload that product, is it labeled as you expected it to be labeled? Did it come from the supplier you expected with the documentation that demonstrates that it is organic certified, for example? Then without, getting too into the details, from there, that's the beginning. And then you have critical controls throughout your whole production system, from warehousing to picking ingredients for processing, to staging, to processing itself, through packaging. Every step along the way has the potential for your system to break down. And that's really what the development of these SOPs is all about. Regardless of whether you're looking at food safety, regardless of whether you're looking at organic or other product integrity claims.
And I would add to that, for us at Clean Label Project, so much of compliance for our programs is we talk about heavy metals. And so heavy metals is an increasingly hot topic with consumers, as well as from a regulatory perspective. And along those lines, I mean, there's some things about heavy metals which are important to note. So first, heavy metals, and so when I say heavy metals, we're talking about total arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. They are naturally present in the Earth's crust. However, because of human causes, things like mining, fracking, industrial agriculture, pollution happens. These contaminants end up in the air, the water, and the soil, and the plants ultimately have no choice but to suck this stuff up. And unlike traditional food safety that you can use pasteurization, different types of kill steps, temperature, when it comes to heavy metals, unless you proactively avoid them, they will undoubtedly end up in your finished product. So the thing is, it's one where, in no way do I want to imply that there's brands that are intentionally peppering their products with heavy metals or anything like that. Quite the contrary. Brands, I think, want to do the right thing. But ultimately, it's a matter of thinking about those supplier specifications. So again, if you recognize that one of your critical control points that you have a high risk ingredient, so a few of those would be root crops, rice, chocolate, soy, what are some other ones? Anything with hemp in it these days are some of your high risk ingredients when it comes to heavy metals. It's a matter of putting critical control points around your supplier assurance programs. Even though federal regulation does not require that you test for heavy metals when it comes to these certain high risk commodities, chances are that you might want to, because they are increasingly under scrutiny from both consumers as well as increasingly by retailers. So along those lines, it's a matter of doing those tests. It's a matter of finding different types of testing laboratories that have the necessary accreditations and scopes to make sure they can test down to the sensitivities that you need. To put in perspective, for those of you on the call that currently don't test for heavy metals, it's not that expensive. It's about $120 a sample to get single-digit parts per billion for an accredited analytical chemistry lab to 17025. You're going to be covered for your total arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. Those are going to be the big four that you're going to want to watch for, especially when you're looking at your critical control points, if you're starting to kind of think about how heavy metals factor into your food safety systems.
Right, and where you'll see risk for heavy metals in soils, and a lot of those same soils, you'll see risk for residual pesticides, things like DDT. It's degradation compound DDE. They're reported as the sum of the two, but you can hardly grow anything in the ground in most parts of Ventura County, parts of Los Angeles County, without finding DDT residues. Doesn't matter if you're growing conventional, organic, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce. It really is a ubiquitous, kind of thing down there. So when you are sourcing from these areas, it really is important to know where your risk lies and then what kind of testing you can do to mitigate that. Testing really should be a part of really good fundamentals in action. The more diverse your supply chain is, the more growing regions that you source from, there's a broad diversity of risks that you can be encountering, whether it's industrial contaminants, whether it's heavy metals, whether it's pesticides, whether it's pathogens. So a good sound testing program is, well, for example, a requirement if you're going to be gluten-free certified, a requirement if you're going to be non-GMO project certified. But whether you're looking at single attributes like gluten, like non-GMO, or a broad spectrum test like heavy metals, like pesticides, a lot of the same fundamentals that come into play with your sampling plan, how you report and how you collect your samples and what you do with that data really are going to be similar regardless of what you're looking at. And then a lot of what you want to look at too when you're selecting your labs, Jackie touched on it, you want to make sure that you're looking at accredited labs for the methodology that you are using them to test for, regardless of whether it's non-GMOs or heavy metals or anything in between.
And I'm interested in, Brandon, your thoughts that, at least for us, one of the things that Clean Label Project we always pay attention to and what we identify as high risk is, you can't underestimate the impact that a global supply chain has on your food safety system. When you're talking about imports, we can have the most progressive environmental and policies here, but given the globalization of the food supply, these incoming ingredients are ultimately being created and grown under the conditions of the regulatory systems in those countries. And so for us, there's certain imports that are naturally inherently higher risk. Within your programs, how do you handle and view imports?
That is, I'd say, maybe the single most challenging risk for some of our clients to manage. There's no doubt about that. Imports coming, globally, but a lot of right now the protein powders and supplement products that are coming from parts of Asia, China, India, grain products from Eastern Europe, grain products from Brazil. I mean, really, there's hardly a place that you can look, not to be alarmist here, but there's hardly a place that you can look and not identify some specific and very real risk, vector. What I really encourage in organic is to require much more documentation than what I often see. As globalization really, kind of becomes an inevitability, from a regulatory standpoint, governments, certifiers can try to keep up, but when you're talking about government agencies like the National Organic Program, which is a branch of USDA, it's maybe not quite the immovable object that FDA is, but it's not as dynamic as a sports car or anything like that either. So things like transaction certificates, I think, are really important. The National Organic Program requires them for imports that are coming from markets where we have established equivalency agreements with other governments, but they are not required or universally used for imports that are coming from other areas where, say, a product is being certified to USDA organic. However, that isn't to say that it's not a tool that can be deployed, because it absolutely is. And so we have a number of our clients that are importing from China. requiring that EcoCert China is issuing transaction certificates for every shipment that comes stateside here, attesting to the certified status of that product on a lot by lot, shipment by shipment basis. So really stepping up those documentation requirements of what you receive from your suppliers to accept their shipments. And I really, in addition to that, can't emphasize enough the importance of really getting to know your suppliers. If you have the means to go and visit them, to do audits of their facilities, to really understand what their food safety plan looks like, what their quality plan looks like, what kind of testing are they doing? And again, are they using testing that is done internally, or are they using external testing at accredited labs? I think that for imports, that is definitely the number one thing that we see in organic processing that can be a really, challenging factor for people to mitigate. But if they know where to look, if they know the questions to ask, they can definitely do so effectively.
I'll add one to that as well, Brandon. You kind of teed me up for it. One of the things that we see at Clean Label Project, especially when we do category testing, where we go into the marketplace, procure samples, and then look to get a broad range of data in order to get a kind of a landscape perspective of products. What's interesting is that frequently you can see different predictors of, I'll call it quality, but in the case of this, when I mean quality, it's like different predictors of like lower heavy metals, lower pesticides, lower plastic contamination, and obviously there's a wide variety of definitions under quality, but for purposes of this conversation, we're talking about these three. And one of those predictors that we see is brands that have the ability to be vertically integrated. In other words, brands that own their own supply chain, because then they can dictate the policies and the procedures as well as the specifications of those ingredients. However, majority of the industry does not have that luxury. 80% of food products are actually use a co-manufacturer, but we actually, along those lines of using a co-man, you can see different markers and predictors of quality. Those predictors of quality, for those that use a co-manufacturers, how close the finished brand manufacturer is to the ingredient suppliers. In other words, goes back to that whole concept, know your farmer, know your food. Same thing shows up when you talk about your finished products, that it's a matter of, do your ingredient suppliers know you? Have you completely outsourced all of the QA, QC formulation process, or how close do you stay to it, so that really those suppliers know that, no, you care and you want to make sure that you have input and say on exactly that finished product, that finished product quality.
And when you're, an upstart brand, or, somebody that's got a great recipe and a really great idea, I think that the biggest mistake that we see made sometimes is relinquishing that control to maybe your co-manufacturer. And if you are a brand owner and you really do hold strong fundamentals about where you want your product to come from and your ability to understand that and to convey that story to your consumer, it really is important to really understand the value of retaining control of that, I think to what degree that you can. And really don't get caught into the trap of being a brand owner that thinks it's your only job to market this product. You really do have to become involved in the sourcing of these ingredients, the selection of the ingredients, where they come from, and really beat that drum, to make sure that really the final product that you deliver is the one that you set out to procure. All right. So we've given some examples of what fundamentals in action here actually look like. I think one more thing in that regard that I do want to just kind of touch on is the behavioral science element a little bit, and really acknowledge that your employees are doing what they do for a reason. And when you're talking about making SOPs, when you're talking about operationalizing your food safety program, rules are very rarely broken just because somebody wants to go out there and break them. Understand why your employees do what they do. And it isn't always about making more rules for them to follow, creating more records, making more standard operating procedures. It's about making sure that the ones that you have are the right ones, and the ones that you have in place really can leverage these behavioral patterns. I think it's really important to kind of separate the external requirements, right? The external compliance requirements of your food safety standard, of your organic standard, from kind of these human element process issues? Are the rules followed? And then work on those human element issues with the individuals who perform those tasks. And I think that really what we see a lot of is just this kind of, for whatever reason, this tendency to want to just go out and start writing your way out of problems by creating rules before you really start taking a step back and looking at what it is that your organization does, and really assessing those behavioral patterns of the talent that you have on the team. Understand what characteristics lie within each staff member, and then start taking that into account when you're assembling your team, to leverage those individual strengths. I think that that is a really important part of any team that you're assembling, whether you're a food processor, whether you're in any business, really. But really just kind of really trying to understand why it is that people do what they do, and then get them involved in finding the solutions. If you find there's a certain part of the process that maybe you've written as a quality manager and time again people have a hard time following it, well, assign those people to the solution and get them working on what does good process look like for us and what's going to work. And it's really important to keep an open mind, I think, as you start this journey, as you're going down this path of really writing good process, sound fundamentals, and you know, making that your launch pad. Know that you're not going to be perfect on day one. Just get to that starting line. Really start by writing down what it is that you do. Literally go through your QC runs, your trial runs, and write down what it is that you do and start from there, and let that be the baseline rather than trying to create this manifesto or create something that's perfect for your SOPs, kind of from this idealized mountain before actually operationalizing it and getting your hands dirty. All right, so really now we're going to talk about what does it mean to differentiate your brand, and to leverage this effort that you have put forth, by laying this framework, by developing a good HACCP plan, by rooting your SOPs in good manufacturing practices, good ag practices. From my perspective, really getting to this point is the investment again. You know, your food safety certification is your outbreak insurance policy. Outbreaks are incredibly expensive, and that's why, you know, making a really sound food safety plan that's rooted in good fundamentals, is so valuable. But where people really, I think, tend to miss the value is by stopping there, getting it to a point where this will help you pass your food safety audit, but not really taking it that next step that does, like we say, really make this something that you can build a corporate culture around, something that you can really hang your hat as a founder of a company on and say, we've set out and achieved to do what we've wanted to do. So kind of getting into this talking point a little bit more, let me go back to us. Really now from an organic certifier's standpoint, or non-GMO or gluten-free, the programs that I've been involved in, as goes for food safety, so goes for product certifications. The SOPs, again, that are rooted in your HACCP plan, that are in your GMPs, your food safety program, are exactly the process that forms this groundwork for these other certification programs. So really to just kind of stop there and then not take it that extra step and really be considering at least product certification that can help you differentiate your brand is really to do a disservice to your business in a way. You know, consider the development of that food safety program just that initial investment that can just be leveraged time and time again. Anything else to say in that regard, Jackie?
Yeah, I was going to say, when it comes to optimizing your efforts, like we talked about before, it's a matter of consumers want to know this information. They're really interested in how food is made and where ingredients come from. But it's also a matter of making sure that with these different certifications that you leverage them at retail. What gives you a reason to win? It's not like, you know, unfortunately, it's not like retailers are sitting there and saying, boo, I wish somebody would sell me something so I can put it on these empty shelves. You know, for the most part, it's like they've already got products, great tasting products that consumers love that are up on those grocery store shelves. What makes you so special? What gives you that reason to win? And so along those lines, it's a matter of making sure that all of those investments that you make in, whether they're food safety, food safety, different types of third-party certifications around sustainable, non-GMO, organic, Clean Label Project certification. It's a matter of incorporating all of those stories into your retail pitch decks. Sometimes it's a matter of tying the stuff back to pop culture. I mean, every day you see different kinds of stories play out, on social media and mainstream media, tying these back to what those influencers are talking about so that you can show that why this investment in these different certifications is so relevant and why it matters to consumers. Take credit for this investment that you've done and have it work for you from a marketing perspective as well as from a food safety and public health perspective.
Right, and that's the important thing too. I think that really something like USDA Organic or like Clean Label Project or like, non-GMO Project, it really does give you something that is front and center to consumers, something that they are looking for, something that gives you a reason to engage with them in a way that you otherwise perhaps weren't engaging with them. Producing a social media campaign about the launch of your new product line that's non-GMO Project verified, helping leverage their brand recognition and their social media platforms, your certifier social media platforms to really get word out, that you've done what you've set out to do and that you really are going that extra mile to give consumers the choices that it is that they're asking for. Are there, Jackie, any specific consumer concerns that you see coming that maybe people aren't thinking about yet or aren't maybe aware of, something that they can kind of really, some energy that they can tap into that maybe is on the horizon?
Yeah, and so in terms of chemicals that I would say on the horizon that people are not paying attention to yet, but it's coming, I would say a couple things. The first one would be PFAS. You guys have probably heard of this. This is kind of like that fluoride-based ingredient that has been used, especially over on the West Coast now, used in different types of kind of firefighting chemicals. But now it's literally everywhere in soils and water. It's showing up in cosmetics and food products, and it's one of these forever chemicals that doesn't go away. Right now, you're able to kind of test for it, kind of, but it's literally showing up in everything, and it's increasingly front of mind in terms of influencers talking about this chemical showing up in food. The other one that I would keep an eye out is that I anticipate the next glyphosate is going to be, it's called chlorpyrifos. It's another one that's been called on by the EPA to get banned, and I'm sure you can speak to this one, Brandon. It's been called on for the EPA to ban because of its links to, especially harmful for children. And so now it's just recently been banned, but the thing is, again, it's going to go back to those imports because this is a chemical that's frequently used. So I'd say keep an eye out for those. Those are definitely hot topics on the horizon.
Right, chlorpyrifos is a big one for sure, and anyone that isn't following that definitely should be, because like Jackie said, this is going to be a real risk for imported supply chains. Anytime a pesticide gets recommended for removal by EPA, and that means removal for domestic use, then it becomes quite a matter of time usually before international markets catch up, if they ever do. So things like that are really important to be mindful of. And again, it really just kind of does underscore the importance of, okay, great, you've gotten here, you've got your HACCP plan in place. Now what? Where are my risks? What can I do to engage the parties necessary to help mitigate those risks and connect with the consumers who are looking for a product that delivers what they're expecting? I think really too, when you really look at risk within a supply chain, this is something that I think can be overlooked to some degree, and really trying to understand what it is that your suppliers are doing, regardless of whether you're in a food safety program, a gluten-free program. Do you have a supplier vetting program? Do you know what they're doing? Can you ensure that you're only sourcing from those suppliers who have been approved? Do you know what kind of testing that you need to do to demonstrate compliance, to mitigate that risk, and to really not only meet that requirement for your food safety audit, but again, going back to this kind of doctrine that you've established, what is your true north? Where do you want to be? And if it's for the elimination of pesticides from my products, really knowing what it is that you need to do, really knowing what kind of testing it is, what kind of labs can do this work, what kind of qualifications they need to have. And regardless, again, of if you're looking at a avoiding pesticides or avoiding gluten? Do you have a system in place that can prevent commingling of ingredients that are involved in this program versus ingredients that aren't involved in this program? So many of these fundamentals that we really kind of started to talk about a little bit at the onset of this presentation are going to just keep paying dividends time and time and time again as you add a program like gluten-free, then non-GMO, then organic, and you start looking at pesticides. Really, you're not creating a new program from square one every time. And I think that that's really an important takeaway for people to understand.
I would add that maybe one other thing to pay attention to, and it's a little bit of a tangent, is pull into your CCPs, take a look at your product packaging, and take a look at how your label claims may become a critical control point. One of the things I frequently see on label claims, and I hear it all the time, is I see different free from claims, like free of, free from phthalates, phthalate free, paraben free. And the thing is, it's like free, like absolute zero, or is it one where it's like, listen, I didn't add it, but I can't speak to what my suppliers did? Free of meaning we tested it down to 1 part per million. Well, the thing you've got to look at is what is the definition of that from the consumer that's reading it. If there isn't a federal definition, then the onus is on you to make sure that you substantiate what you mean by that claim. And if it's one where that you don't have it basically kind of like asterisks and then kicking back to your website so that people can find out the details, then you leave it open to interpretation, and that's where things can get tricky, especially from a legal perspective. So along those lines, it's a matter of not only looking at your certifications. Third-party certification is so important because it's basically a third party substantiates those claims for you. But if you make those independent claims, like free from claims on product packaging, make sure that you figure out what exactly your definition is of any of those claims.
Right. And don't hesitate to contact a third-party certifier because they can certainly help you navigate through any of those risks as well. It can be a real daunting task to try to navigate as a brand owner, and you see your competitors doing it and you want to make the same claim. But it again really is important to understand that it's, well, obviously legal, but grounded in good science and good process. Great. Well, we have basically arrived at the end of the discussion today. We really appreciate all you who have carved the time out of your day to join us, and certainly hope that you have learned a lot today. And maybe it's not such a daunting task to just kind of get started and to put pen to paper and start writing that plan that, again, can really serve as a launchpad for things to come. For more information about SCS and our food integrity programs, our certification programs, Ned Hallaby, my colleague here on our sales team, is the individual who you would want to connect with. His contact information is right here on the screen. And again, a link to this recording is going to go out to everybody. So at this time, we'd like to open it up to questions. If you have anything that you would like to ask Jackie and I, again, there is a way to do that here through the GoToWebinar platform. If you just look at your dashboard, there's a couple of sections, and next to questions, there is a little drop down. And so you can go ahead and drop your questions in there, and I will try to do my best to get to them. Need to make this a little bit bigger. They're all looking very, very tiny. Well, unfortunately, it seems that I'm only able to see one line at a time in these questions. Let's see, I've got one here. Can you put up names of these chemicals mentioned that we see mainly in sugar products? Anything that comes to mind, Jackie, in sugar, any specific risk vectors? I mean, for me, it would be pesticides that are, more common in your tropical regions and maybe not registered here for use in the United States.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I was thinking, I remember Clean Label Project, we actually did a category test looking at sugars as well as honeys. And the thing that was interesting is that it's actually, I didn't see anything interesting in terms of heavy metals or pesticides. The thing I would pay attention to in terms of like your sugars is depending on if you're talking about a liquid sugar or like crystallized. One of the things to pay attention to is your packaging. And so it's really interesting. I remember so often I see people make finished product BPA-free claims. And I'm like, that's fine and all, but there's been times that we've tested product and we comes back with BPA contamination, and I'll say, how is this possible? You know, we use BPA-free packaging. And it's like, oh, well, then your perfectly good BPA-free packaging is being contaminated by your BPA-laden product. So clearly it's somewhere else in the supply chain. So sometimes it's a matter of, you know, sometimes don't just think about the goop inside, start thinking about how that packaging or even how your supplier's packaging may influence it. I remember a story that I heard for BPA contamination was a certain vegetable, just when it was harvested in the field, it was going into these big totes, and the totes were under the Southern California sun, and they were BPA lined, and that BPA leached from the tote into the vegetable, made its way all the way through the production process, and you're able to see it on testing at the end. It literally was like a 3-cent increase in the cost of each of these totes in order to fix this BPA contamination problem. So sometimes it's just a matter of do the test a couple times. You know, sometimes it's a matter of looking at your, and so I mentioned this for sugar because I think about all the way that sugar is toted, as well as how liquid may be loaded hot, which if it is and it ends up in a plastic container, the chances of it leaching are going to be higher. So I would pay attention to one of those high risks, is more so being kind of your packaging or kind of like storage containers.
Great. And another tool that you know, if for example, you wanted to look up the pesticides that are registered on something like sugarcane, there are a couple of ways to do that. One way would be to go through EPA and actually look up their tolerances in this humongous book that they have. An easier way, there's a nice tool that's out there online, and regardless of the commodity,
Global MRL, is it Global MRL?
well, yeah, the Bryant Christie Global MRL database.
If you guys don't have that down, I literally have it as like at the top of mine as like I literally access it every day. And the fact that it's a free resource, you look at it, it tells you, oh, you look at the pesticide, the commodity, the country of destination, and it just spits out the answer for you and what's the maximum tolerance on different commodities. I mean, it's brilliant. If you don't have it, check it out.
It really is an outstanding resource. I'll let me see if I can put it in the I'll just put the link here in the chat. If anyone wants to go out there, you can create an account. It's free and it's a wonderful resource, and you can just look up any commodity, look up all the pesticides that are registered for that commodity, and then download them into an Excel file even if you want to. So that is a really good resource for pesticides. Let's see, another question, is rice a carrier of heavy metals? To my knowledge, yes. Rice is absolutely something that you should be looking for heavy metals in.
Yep, absolutely agree. And the other thing too that's interesting when it comes to rice, it just has this high, it goes back probably a decade now. Dartmouth did a really interesting investigation to the levels of total arsenic, as well as specifically inorganic arsenic in rice. Sometimes it comes down to the water, sometimes it comes down to the soil in which it's grown. The thing that's interesting is a lot of the arsenic has a tendency to bioaccumulate in the hull. That's the brown rice, the part of the kind of the outside of it. But nevertheless, yes, you do see that rice is serving as a high risk commodity for heavy metals.
And rice is popping up in more and more places now where maybe you're not expecting it, as a sweetener, brown rice syrup, and things like that. So I mean, there are a lot of derivative products that, you know, if it can be found in rice, I think there are some downstream applications now for processed rice products where you should probably be looking as well. Let's see. We did not hear the name of the chemical that you mentioned that we should really be aware of. So it's chlorpyrifos. Isn't that the one, Jackie?
Yeah, it was that one, and then PFAS, PFAS, and it's a big polyfluorinated AS. It's a big long name, but check it out. It's one where this is going to be food contamination, water contamination, soil contamination. Everybody's going to have the problem. It's just a matter of right now, it's a matter of still figuring out how do you test for it. And then the whole second thing is how you're going to get it out of the system. But again, this is what I see as kind of the next, both of those chemicals are kind of the next frontier of these different kind of like high risk chemicals. But yeah, I would say heavy metals is a pressing one now, but these are on the horizon very soon.
Let's see, what industries are you seeing as a heightened risk for food safety issues? Go ahead, take that one away, Jackie.
At least in my world, the biggest one I would say right now, I would say the one that has the most scrutiny right now is going to be baby food, just because the Baby Food Safety Act of 2021, we see that as significant. But what's going to happen is right now that law is targeting, foods that are marketed towards children in the first 1,000 days of life, age 2 and under. Quickly, this is going to spiral into talking about little kid food, talking about food marketed towards pregnant women. And then all of a sudden, it's going to very quickly kind of spiral into other categories as well. So keep an eye out on heavy metals. That's going to be, I think, the next frontier of food safety. The other category is if anybody is out there that is starting to think about formulating, doing some R&D with CBD products. Clean Label Project did an investigation into the true contents of America's best-selling CBD products. I actually was fortunate enough, after we completed our study, was invited by the United Nations Commission on Narcotics to speak in Vienna, Austria about our findings. Levels of heavy metals. Hemp is a natural bioaccumulator. In fact, military installations plant hemp to basically serve as a garbage collector to clean up the stuff that's in the dirt. And so if you are sourcing any CBD products, any hemp-based products, recognize that the plant is just inherently good at sucking up bad stuff from the ground. And because of that, it's a matter of making sure that, again, you do that upfront due diligence, have that high-risk product tested. It's going to set you back $120 to test for those heavy metals, and make sure that you try to get as low as possible. There's, in terms of what Clean Label Project has seen, we've observed CBD products literally in excess of 1 part per million of lead, which is high. You're going to want to get into the single double-digit parts per billion when it comes to a high-risk commodity like that. But yes, watch if you're looking to formulate or doing any R&D with hemp-based products.
Great. Perfect. Well, if there are any other questions that you guys haven't had a chance to get in yet, just feel free to, you can continue to add them here into the chat. I'll stay on for another couple of minutes. Otherwise, thank you so much again for coming today. Again, we will make this recording available to everybody who attended today. That will be coming in your emails either later this afternoon or tomorrow. And be definitely following SCS and our webinar series. Here on your screen, you can see the next 2 events that we have in the next couple of months. So we'll look forward to hopefully seeing many of you in the not too distant future.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks, everybody.